Okay, first things first. So I sent out an announcement about this. This is an unknown file to me right here. The only thing that I can say that you might recognize as being yours is this copy -3. That -3 was not a part of the original file name. This is what the file looks like. So again, I'm trying to figure out who did this so that I can grade it and give you credit for it. If any of these layers up here, these look like spill removal layers to me. So if anybody recognizes this, can you please just send me an email and say, yeah, that was my picture, and then I'll actually grade you for it, because otherwise there's no way, I just don't, I have no idea who did this. Say what? So this was so again, this was assignment 5.2, but we didn't get to it in the 5th week. So you turned this in, so you got the assignment. We went over this in week 7, and you would have turned it in week 7. I call it, you would have been the assignment, you would have started it at week 7 and turned it in week 8. So week 8 is when I got it in the Dropbox. Okay, so for what it's worth, other than that, if you got graded for this already for 5.2, because this is not the retouching assignment. So if you got graded, if you have a grade for assignment 5.2, this is not yours. Okie dokie. Let's take a look at something else here. We're not going to take a look at a ton of these, but I do want to show you a couple of these just to have a quick conversation about some of the challenges that happen in here and some that didn't. Shoot, because those are the ones that I'm looking for right now. Oh, yeah. I will show you how to, yes. So. So anyway, this was Chloe's really quickly. I just want to show. And there was a lot of stuff that went really well in all of this, including the tooth fix. The only thing that I would say about this, so I'll just give you guys a quick sort of preview before and after. So this is what it looks before and after and before and after. So I thought the skin retouching was really nicely done. It kept all the texture in it, which is, again, for me, paramount. It smoothed things out. That part looked great. You did add the other little tooth back there, and one of the keys to that was that it was actually a little bit darker. So you guys need to think about depth in an image and what causes that. And in this case, the lighting is coming from the right side across, so her lip would be throwing a shadow on this tooth that it's not showing, that it's not throwing on that front tooth. So it means that because of the lighting, you know that this actually tooth that was added is further back into her mouth, and that this tooth is now more forward. But if you take a look at what's going on here, this tooth is still casting a shadow on the other one, which is why they look still crossed. So the solution to uncrossing this was simply tonal retouching to lighten this shadow up. You still need a crease in between the teeth, but to lighten it up so that it doesn't look like one tooth is throwing a shadow on top of the other one. That's the whole trick to this, right? There's a couple of other things that you could have done that we had not gotten to yet. So this is I'm going to ramble around here a little bit. Only about half of you did the liquefy assignment, which was fine. And so what I finally decided to do, because I've been fighting with this thing forever, I keep trying to find an assignment that is less about making people skinny or heavier or that kind of stuff, that still allows you to explore the tool without reservations about it, for lack of a better way of putting it. And this is one of those cases. So to reshape the bottom of this tooth that has been broken is a perfect thing for liquefy, right? It's just those kinds of things you need to think about in doing this sort of like work. So I just sort of wanted to throw that whole part out there. So how to do the hair really quickly. I'm going to double click back here. I'm going to find where you actually changed the hair. Oh, you maybe didn't do the hair, so let me just check really quickly. So I'm going to just show you guys how I would approach this part. Yeah, perfect. So I can approach this part. So what I would do is, you can see that she's got a serious layer stack going on here, right? And the problem in doing a lot of retouching at this stage of the game is that you need this to all be grouped together. So for instance, if she'd done any tonal work up in the, wow, this looks so pixelated on this screen. This is ridiculous. Has this screen always been this bad? Oh, sorry. Anyway, all the more reason, I guess, to watch the video. Okay, anyway. I can't remember it looking this bad. It's got to be a resolution thing on this. This thing has got to be set at some other resolution. I'm going to see if we can't get that fixed. Anyway, because that's unwatchable. So at any rate, the point that I was trying to make is, let's say she had actually done some work up around the hairline here that was done either tonally or was done with pixels or anything like that, any of that stuff. If that has already been done and she's happy with where this is at right now, it's impossible to go back in here and then start to try to do pixel work lower down in the stack. To come into the group here, down at the bottom, and start to try to do this work down in here, that becomes problematic, right? So instead, I am okay with going all the way up to the very top, clicking on this thing at the very top, holding down Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E, and making a merge stamp. So now this gives me another new version. It may be my third or fourth version in this group, but at least everything is together in this group, and I can go in and fix the hair right now. And if it needs to be, if it gives me, it's all together in one place. Does that sort of make sense to everyone? What's going on here? All right. So then the way I would go attack this is, I'm going to hit the lasso tool. I'm going to grab a big area of hair. Again, a lot of people grab way too small areas of this, and the problem that you run into if you grab too small of an area of this is that you all of a sudden you get the perfect, you fix the hairline perfectly, but then you run out of hair at the very top, and all of a sudden you're like, oh God, I don't have any hair up at the very top. If you'd only made a bigger selection to start with, you would have been fine. So anyway, I'm going to jump this to its own layer, Command J, and then I'm going to zoom in on this, and I'm going to transform it. So Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. And what I want to do is, I want to pull hair that's up in here down to this part, but I want to anchor it up at the very top. So you remember, I've got an anchor point. If I pull down from the bottom right now, if I do this, watch, if I pull down like this, say what? Oh, anyway. That's what I'm ultimately going to do. I'm going to pull this hair down. I want to leave this stuff up at the very top because, again, I want hair to, I don't want hair to start and stop. I don't want all of a sudden to try to do a patch that goes right into here and then try to blend it into this. That will never happen. So if I can simply draw this hair down enough, I will be fine. So I'm going to draw it down a little bit more, like that. And go ahead and say OK to that. I can go back in and transform it. I probably should have made this a smart object first. Matter of fact, I'm going to do that right now. So I'm going to Command Z to undo that, turn this into a smart object so that I can continually transform this if I need to, and it won't be destructive. And then again, Command T to bring up the transform dialog box, pull this down as much as I think I need it to be pulled down. Say OK. Put a black layer mask on this, holding down the Option key. Click on that, puts on a black layer mask. I am going to go to a tablet really quickly. And hit the B key to get a brush. And in my brush, you want medium hardness on this brush. Again, I'm going to try to push it up a little bit. The harder you get the edge of your brush, the less you're going to be combining old texture with new texture. Because again, I'm not worried about the center of the brush. The center of the brush will replace this completely. But the edge of the brush, as it starts to fade out, that's where you start to mix old texture and new texture, which is a problem. So anyway, I'm going to leave it, we'll call it 60%. Normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow, because you want it all to be that way. This brush is way too big, so make it smaller. hit the D key to make sure my foreground color, my foreground color is white. And then I'm just going to, working on my layer mask right here, run a new line across here. Wow, the lag on my computer is just nuts. And then I'm going to work it all the way up to the edge, and I'm going to work this all the way out to the edge as well. And then this is what my layer mask looks like right now. So again, I've got a little bump right there. I'm going to continue that one out. I'm going to fill all this in. And I'm not even looking at my image. I just know that I've got to carry this from her forehead all the way out. And then I'm going to go back and take a look at my image. This line seems way too strong for me right now, so I'm going to break the link between these two, click on the image itself so I can just move it, hit the V key to actually get the move tool, and then I'm going to try to work this in like that. And then there's some cleanup to do, like this part right here. I don't like what's going on there, so I'm going to go back to my layer mask, hit the B key again, hit black as my foreground color, and then try to knock that part off without it seeming like it's too far out. And again, I would continue to work on this more, but that would be the general gist, how I would go about doing that. So that again, I don't worry about having new hair all of a sudden crashing into, because what a lot of people do is this. If you take a look again at the layer mask, they'll do this. They say, well, you don't need, and this didn't go all the way up to the top. This should go all the way to the top. So again, the B key, X to make this, get this all the way out to the top so that you don't worry about starting and stopping. So this is how I would do that part. And again, we'll take a look at it here. So this is what I would have done. But if you don't carry it, so what a lot of people did is this. So some people did this part. They just did the fix right here. And then what was even worse is then people started doing this. They started to change like the flow of this brush. And then they would do stuff like this. Sorry. Oh, my lag is awful today. They would do shit like this, and this would be their fix, and it would just be like, okay, you can spot hair, you can see right where this line, you can see that line right there. You know exactly where hair has started and stopped. You can spot that whole thing, and there's no way to figure that, to put that in. So then people start blurring that layer, and again, the more you blur it, the more you're mixing old texture with new texture, and it's a shit show. So I just cover it completely. That's how I would fix it. Questions about that? Okay. So the fix on the mouth, let me cancel out of this really quickly. The fix on the teeth, there was a couple of ways of doing it. I'm not sure how you did yours, but I think you actually copied a tooth and brought it over. You copied out of her, right? There was a folder inside your inside that assignment that had new mouths written on it. Did everybody see that part? There's a reason I put that shit in there. So if we go take a look really quickly. Was this in 7? Yeah. This thing, new mouths. Sorry. There's a lot of them. And they were all trying to give me teeth. This is a successful one. It works pretty good. It's not the best. This is actually a better one for it. Some of these work better than others. It means you've got to go in and do some serious color matching, but this is just my collection of mouths. So I just gave them all to you. It wasn't like, oh yeah, you need to use, oh, this is another good one. This actually one works really pretty well. Because part of it is you have to change the lighting on this because the lighting is different and all that kind of stuff, whatever. But this was an idea. It's another way to actually go about doing this. If you can't, so another one is just to close her mouth. Don't fix the teeth at all. You need to start thinking like this. It was like, remember the hair with the girl that we were trying to, you remember the sunny one? And I was just like, you guys are trying to get all the skin behind that hair and that will never happen. Just cover the whole, all the skin, just get rid of it all, right? Yes, Charles. You'd put a new mouth over it, and the trick to it is, it's not just a transform to scale it. You need to warp it so you can actually take a new mouth and change the whole lip line and the whole bottom lip line so that the teeth just end up being in the middle. So it's the best way to actually go about doing this. Are we good on this part? All right. So I would go on for more, but that covers pretty much the bases that I wanted to get by with all of this. But anyway, so then I'm going to show you one on the liquefy, because it'll answer hopefully a lot of the questions that people had about liquefy. I'm going to do it really quickly. Again, because I want to spend time. I want to go over this stuff. That part matters to me, but I also want to get on with everything else that we need to get to today. So, 8, 9. Oh, I'm not even going to do it. I'm just going to show. So I actually did it. And I'll just show you what I did. This will save us time. Okay, so this was Mark's. And if we take a look at what Mark ultimately did on this, I'm going to show you the kind of the befores and after. This is where it was, and this is where he got it to. And for the most part, things worked out really pretty well. He still sort of kept things. A couple of things that I said to a number of people on here, when you go to actually do the legs right here, some of you just simply pushed in from the side, from the outside towards the center part right here. That destroys the shape of the leg. You need to have, the leg needs to stay tapered and it needs to stay relative. And Mark actually did that part. If you take a look, when I go before and after here, you'll see that the inside of the legs are also coming in narrower, so he keeps the shape of them all. That part you need to actually do. Otherwise, it just looks like the figure has been distorted to be pushed in. But then the face becomes the real problem with all of this. And you can see, even though he did a fairly good job of this, the solution to doing the face, this is the exact same file right here. So this is Mark's file. And so the trick to this is the first thing to do is to actually push the hair in considerably on the side. So this is the thing that trips up a lot of people. A couple of you did a really good job on this stuff, except for you ended up with repeating weird pattern right in here. So for me, I actually just pushed the hair in just to give it a better shape. So you can see the hair is like really, there's something wrong with the hair right here. It's like really sort of squiggly. It looks liquefied, right? So simply push it in. But I also wanted to push it in to hide it because I'm going to add a new head on top of it. And so adding the new head on top of it looks like this. This is the new head. And if we take a look at this new head, I'm going to turn the layer mask off really quickly. This is the layer mask that I actually put on there. So, I mean, this is the head that I cut out. So you're just seeing the new head. So this is what the new head looks like. In order to actually bring the new head into the right space and transform it into the right thing, I'll just show you another version of it really quick. We'll just do it really quickly so you can see it. So I'm going to go down to my bottom layer, hit the lasso tool. I'm going to turn off the top one so that I can see what I'm actually selecting. So again, select a really big area of this. Jump it to its own layer, Command J. Drag this up on top of the liquefy. So it's right here. I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. There are times where I want to just take my phone and put it down on the ground and just stomp on it. It's like, leave me the fuck alone. So at any rate, I need to orient the head, and it's all about the eyes. It's the way you actually do it. So I'm going to drop the opacity of this slightly. And you can see it's in a very different spot. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. I'm going to take the V key and I'm going to move it to line up this one eyeball. So it's this one eye right here. This is the one that I'm going after. Then I'm going to hit Command T to bring open the transform dialog box. I'm going to zoom back out a little bit so you can see my control handles. You take the anchor point right here. Remember the anchor point, everything happens around that anchor point. So if you transform around the anchor point, if you make things larger or smaller, it does it. It is the anchor point. you can anchor this image now to the eye, so it's the same eye. So I'm going to grab the anchor point and put it right in the middle of that eye. So now when I rotate this, it rotates around that other eye, and then I can bring it up so that her eyes now match. That's how you get that as close as you can get it. And then I would go ahead and say okay to this, then bring my transparency back up, put a layer mask on this, and then again, this is now a black layer mask. Hit the brush, B key for a brush, 100% opacity, 100% flow, normal. In this case, again, I would keep this as a medium hardness brush so that I can really control where I see it, where I don't. White is my foreground color, make my brush a little bit smaller, and then start to simply paint in the undistorted face. And then the trick just gets to be lining the hair up. Every now and then I will go in, I will duplicate this again and go into liquify to push it in so that I don't run into a weird hair going on in there. So this is ultimately what, this is where I ultimately got. And it looks great. Questions? Okay. That's all we are going to look at on that. The next thing I want to get all of us involved. So the next thing I want to do is a very quick knockout of, it was assignment 8.3. So if I can get everybody to find assignment 8.3, it was the girl that was on the green background. I want to do this really quickly with you guys. We're not going to spend a great deal of time doing it, but it's important. A lot of you got it pretty well done. A lot of you didn't. And so it's again, most of you are really grasping this whole thing, and I just need to make sure, I just want to carry everybody over the finish line. And so this one is especially challenging, so I just want to go through it again really fast, and then we will move on to doing radical extreme color correction. Boy, won't that be fun. Okay, so it is assignment 8.3, so if you can go to your session number 8 and find in your assignment folder the it's the green screen one, it's the green screen test. That's the one that we're looking for. If you can open that up into Photoshop. Everybody gonna do this, Johnny? Got it? Okay, so my first move is, again, I'm going to run 0 selective color on here, and this is really the part that matters, is this part. So I'm gonna need to find my 0 selective color, one of them. Go ahead and run it. Again, in my case right now, I don't end up with the black image. It's only because in my properties panel, I do not have absolute selected. I have relative, so I'm just going to click on absolute. I'm then going to get rid of these guidelines because they bother me. So up to the view menu, down to guides, down to clear guides. Then in your properties panel for the selective color layer at the top, you use the drop-down menu to come down to greens, and then grab the black slider and drag it all the way to the right, the black ink slider, all the way to the left, which again is now saying everything that's in green in this image, I'm going to flood with white ink. However, the reason that background did not go white is because that is not a pure green background. So we need to actually amp up the pureness of that green, and that's what the hue saturation slider is about underneath it. So click on the hue saturation slider underneath it. You do have a targeting adjustment tool right now, because you can see right now, we're going to change the saturation of it, but right now this is set to master. It's set to do all the saturations. It's going to saturate every color. That's not what I want. It will actually then, it won't give me the mask that I'm looking for. I only want to saturate the green. However, I need everybody to zoom into this girl's head, because this is what you need to look for especially. So I'm in pretty tight on this hair. So I can see the hair and I can see the fringe on the coat. This is the most challenging part. The rest of her body, for the most part, you could outline. You can't do the red coat that's on the ground. You can't do that with a pen tool. But the rest of it you could do with a pen tool, but we don't have to, but we could. But you can't do the hair. So I'm going to grab the targeting adjustment tool. That's the little hand in the properties panel up at the top, right next to the word that says master. If you click on that and then come over onto your image, you see you get an eyedropper. Watch my screen. Don't do this. Watch my screen. I'm going to say, see this thing that says master? there's a drop-down menu right here. It's going to, when I click on this thing, it's going to change this automatically to greens. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on it, and you see it changes it to greens, and it's only going to saturate this area, this small area of greens that are described by those 2 bars that are at the very bottom. So I'm going to click now. You can go ahead and click on, grab the targeting adjustment tool, click on the green, and then click. If you drag to the right, you saturate things, and that's why the background is getting lighter now, is because I said I want to fill the greens of this image with white ink. I am now making that background a pure, more green. I'm pushing it more towards green, so the impact of that is greater. So my background is beginning to lighten up, but I need everybody to zoom in to the hair that's on her lower right side. This is where I want to continue to work, so I'm going to continue to click and drag over, and what you'll see is all of a sudden the hair inverts. So now I've got hair that's down here that's actually lighter than my background. This is too aggressive of a move. That hair will never show up. It will simply break apart. When I create this as a layer mask, it will be gone. It's lighter than my background. If I get my background to white, all that hair that you see now that is breaking apart in there and turning white will simply go. And so you will end up with hair that is not even connected to other hair in her head. Does that make sense, everyone? So it's just, you're being too aggressive about this. So you need to back this off. So I'm going to drag now, using my targeting adjustment tool, I'm dragging to the left to bring this back down so that I don't have any of that weird white hair stuff happening in here. And the same thing is true if you take a look around her head. You can see there's some problems over here. I'm never going to recover those. There's some up at the very top. I've still got a believable enough. I'm still going to back this off even a little bit more. I still think this is a little bit too aggressive. This feels about right to me. So if you want the very same one that I've got a positive 49 in the saturation for my greens only. That's where I'm at right now. Then I'm going to come over to my red channel. And again, I don't copy. You could click on your RGB channel. You could hover over the RGB part and command click to load this as a selection and save it. The problem with that is though that this is not as contrasty as each of the individual red, green, and blue channels are. To see what I mean, if you click on the red channel, you will see the background just got lighter as well. Now, in theory, that shouldn't happen because this is a black and white image. The all RGB channels should all be exactly equal, and their composite should be equal to them as well. I don't know why this happens, it just does. So instead of copying and saving my RGB channel, I actually just take either the red, green, or blue channel, it doesn't matter which one, they're all identical, and I make a copy of it. So I'm going to simply drag it down to the little icon at the bottom of my channels palette, the square with the plus in the middle. That makes a copy of it. I'm going to double click on it and name it Knockout. And then I'm simply going to put eyedroppers down. So I've already got one color eyedropper on here. I have no idea where it is, so I don't want this part. But oh, actually, take a look at this. Yeah, I'm going to get rid of it. So I'm going to click on my color sampler tool. I'm going to do a clear all, and then I'm going to throw an eyedropper down right here in the middle. And you can see that it's actually reading a 64. It gives me an RGB reading. It gives me a 64, a 203, and a 68. The problem that I've got is that this is not a real reading of the RGB values on this channel. It's a grayscale channel. They should all be the same. Whatever they are, they should all be the same. The reason I'm getting this is that I've still got an adjustment layer that is selected. That's what it's reading. It's reading the mask on my adjustment layer. You need to throw these adjustment layers away. Throw the hue saturation one away, through the color saturation, the selective color one away. Go back to your knockout layer, and now you will see that that little one part right there is now what we would expect. It is a K value, which is the black ink of CMYK. We need this to be a value of RGB. So you click on the eyedropper for the number one, click on it and come down and say I want to see this in RGB values. And I'm getting a 135, 135, 135, which is what I would expect. If you come down and you look right at her middle of her chest, you can see that there is a necklace in there that should actually be black. It's really hard to see on my screen, but you guys should be able to see it on yours. I need that to go black, so I'm going to put another color sampler point down there. I'm going to click on that part. So now I've got my, again, another K value for my point number 2. I'm going to click on that drop-down menu and say I want to see this in RGB color. So now I know what I need to do to get the ideal mask. I need my point number 1 to be white, so I need to get it up to 255. I need my point number 2 to be black, so I need to get it down to 0. So again, the simplest way to do this, I'm going to back out now a little bit more because I want to be able to see what this actually does to her hair when I actually do this part. So Command L to bring up the levels dialog box. Again, this is not an adjustment layer. This is something you only do. It's a destructive move on this knockout channel. But if it all goes to hell, it doesn't matter. I can make this again. It's not like I'm doing destructive work over on my layer palette. So I'm going to actually take my. I'm nervous about what's going on right now because I didn't get any histogram on that at all. I may have a selection going, so I'm going to hit Command D to make sure I do not have a selection going, because otherwise it's only going to give you a readout of it's only going to be a histogram of what is inside that selection. So then I'm going to try this again, Command L to bring up the levels dialog box, and lo and behold, I actually have a histogram right now. So I'm going to grab my black point slider. I'll grab the white point slider first. I'm going to grab the white point and pull it way back. I'm looking at my point number 1 right now. Again, I'm trying to get that 135 up to 255. Don't overshoot it. I'm going to get close to 255, so I'm at a 251 right now. Stop, go to your arrow keys and tap this in. So you just do the absolute minimum to get there. Then I'm going to actually do my black point slider. You can see it's creeped up to 24 now in my case, so I'm going to click on that and drag it sort of towards the middle. And again, I'm looking for that to drop down to, I'm close. I'm at 1 right now. So I'm going to go to my arrow keys again and tap this in. And then I look at my background and I say, well, okay, I got to 255 on my background, but look at your background. Look at how dirty and how much contamination is in that background. That's horrible. So to fix that, you can actually change the sample size of the point. Right now I've got a 3x3. It's too small. I'm going to take my 3x3 and bump it up to an 11x11. And you'll see now it's actually picked that up. It now knows, it's like, oh yeah, there's more shit in there. So I'm at a 253 on my white point, so I'm going to grab my white point again and start to push it over, go to my arrow keys, and tap that in until I get to 255. I'm going to click on my white point, and I'm already so close to 0 right now. I'm just going to use my arrow keys. I'm not even going to try to move that guy. And again, I always tap the key in the wrong direction. If it starts to creep up, you need to go in the other direction. So now this looks better to me. But I still can see a bunch of contamination here in the background. So now you can actually just start to eyeball it. I'm going to click on my white point slider, and I'm just going to watch my background. I'm going to move in here a little bit. I'm looking at all this contamination. All this shit needs to go. So I'm just going to start tapping my arrow keys to go up higher than this. So again, I'm going to do 130, and I'm just typing, and that seems about right to me. So if you want the same values that I've got, before I do this, before I say, okay, I need to see the damage that I've actually done to her hair. And lo and behold, look at how bad this hair is. I've shattered all of this hair. I was way too aggressive on trying to get that white as a pure white. So I'm going to grab my white point slider and I'm going to start to back it off again. So I'm going to go back up, and I'm just trying to bring back in all of this fine little hair part. I'm bringing in a lot of contamination in the background, I know, but I need the hair part. Without that, this thing looks horrible. So I do have some nice hair that's, falling apart on the top. I'm going to use my preview button on and off. I feel good about that part. I think I can push that white just a little bit more, so I'm going to tap it down another couple and just make sure I haven't torn the hair part too badly. I'm worried about this part of the hair right down in here the most. So I'm going to go back up to that 139. Yep, I feel better about that. So if you want the same values that I have for the levels control, I have a 21 for my black point and a 139 for my white. I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. I'm going to double click on the hand here. Now there's a lot of cleanup that I need to do on this, so I'm going to go to my tablet with my pen. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to make my brush larger. I'm going to make it a medium softness, so about a 50% on the brush to give me some control. 100% opacity, 100% flow. White is my foreground color, and then I'm going to zoom into this area that's near her hair, and I'm simply going to click near her hair and start to pull back. And you can see that's damaged her hair just a little bit there. That shows me that my brush is too soft. So Command Z to undo that. I'm going to zoom in a little bit tighter so you guys can actually see this. Oh, I take it back. I'm also going to go to an overlay brush. So let me go back in history because I've got another brush that hit right there. So change this to an overlay brush, and now try again. Click and pull back, and click and pull back, and click and pull back, and pull back, and pull back. God, the lag on this is killing me. And click, and on the other side, and down here. Again, avoid the hair. If you have spill behind it, you're better off keeping that than you are. Oh, come on. And work it off on the other side. And then by the time you get here, you can actually just use your overlay brush. You can zoom back out. We've got all the hair part done right. Why do I have such bad lag? Hang on, guys. I gotta shut something else down. Oh, bridge, always the culprit. All right, hopefully that helps. Then the rest of this, again, you can just run your overlay brush over the whole thing. And you can do the same thing down at the bottom. Again, you can hit around her feet multiple times. It's dark enough in there. Some of you guys actually left this little bit of shadow that's underneath. Again, if you continue to hit it with an overlay brush over and over and over again, you'll get this eventually out. There may be one little sort of like guy left in there. You might have to go in there with either the pen tool or a hard brush and get this part out. But that's basically the method of actually doing this. To see I'm not going to finish this right now, just to see how well we did, I'm going to add a solid color above this background. So click on the circle that's half black, half white, and add a solid color adjustment layer. And I want it to be white. So again, my background color is white. You have when the color picker opens, you automatically have a color picker, the little eyedropper tool. Click on the white to actually give you a white background and say OK. Then I'm going to go back down to my background, and I'm going to make a copy of my background. Command J. Drag that copy now on top of the color fill layer, because I need what I want to do is I want to keep the virgin underneath my color, my white background, and then I need to have a copy of it on the top so that when I put a layer mask on it, it shows this figure on white. So I'm going to then go over to my knockout. Now you can do one of two things. With your knockout right now, you can see the figure is black, so it's going to hide the figure, it's going to show the background. So I can either invert it now, or I can actually put it on as a layer mask and then invert the layer mask. It doesn't really matter which one you do. I'm going to invert this one while I'm here. So click on it to make it active. Don't hover over it. Don't make a selection. Just make it active, the knockout channel active. Command I will invert it. Then hover over the thumbnail with your cursor. Hold down the Command key and click once. It'll load this as a selection, and then back over to your background copy and add it as a layer mask. And wow, I hit something really bad on that one side of her hair. I've moved my layer mask. I've moved my whole channel. So this is a problem. Take a look at this. I'm going to see where it actually happened. It's this move tool right here. This is where it actually happened. So I'm hoping I'm going to be able to recover that. This gets a little tricky, but we'll try it. I'm going to click on my layer mask. I'm going to get rid of this layer mask. I'm going to delete it, not apply it. I'm going to go back to my knockout, and you can see there's a small white border up on the top. So I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool, and I'm going to hope that this will just pop into place. It should just pop into place, but it might not pop into place. And we'll see how, I don't think it's in place, but we'll see. I should be closer. Load that as a selection and try that as a layer mask again. No, it's completely off. Anyway, hopefully you guys get the whole idea. This is what your image should look like. Wow, what a buzzkill for a demo, right? Hang on. Let me see if this is really what I think it is. It just goes to show if you try to do stuff too quick, it does not work out. It may be, I may have the hair done right though, so hang on one second. Let me just load this as a selection. No, you can see the whole thing is off. Somewhere back in here, the whole thing got moved. So yeah, again, anyway, I will show you an example of what this should look like. Oh, let me go back to my notes. Alrighty. This is what the hair should have looked like. This is Chloe's again. But it's really well done. It's all connected and together. Make sense? So the whole trick, what I'm trying to get across to you is that you need to pay attention to how really aggressive you get. And sometimes you can get it all with, just the selective color. Running that zero selective color, running that. Sometimes you have to add a levels adjustment to that, and then sometimes you have to back off on that, and you've got to go in with a brush and fix it with a brush. It's just the only way. Is that good for everybody? Questions about this? All right. Let's talk about extreme color. You do not need to save this. So far in doing our compositing, speaking of, how did the compositing go that you're turning in today? Iffy? Well, that's okay. So I'll just give you a quick heads up about how I work with this one. So I will have that assignment, you turning it in today. We're meeting in class next week. I will have it graded in class next week, and unless there's somebody in here who has an objection, we will take your composites and try to redo them as best as we can together as a class and to solve all the issues that we've got. So you'll get graded on it, but you will also, it will be the content that you, that's what we'll be spending most of next class doing, I hope. I think I'm speaking out of turn here, but that's the plan. So at any rate, in that we actually, last week, you experienced check layers. So did you guys use check layers when you were trying to put this all together, right? And one of those check layers is color. The problem is that it's color that is somewhat close. If you remember the version that we did in class last week, we actually had a color card in both of them and balanced that color card so that they were both neutral colors and then put the two together. And they should have fit really well. And they were close, but they needed to be adjusted to be actually a perfect fit. But we're going to take a look at an issue right now where they are radically different. And you need more radical control for when things get radically different. And the reason I do it the way I do it is that what I'm going to show you right now is for extreme color correction. It is, if you are close to begin with, then the method that I showed you using those check layers will work just fine. But if you need something radical, this is what you do. It's a little bit involved, so I want to show this to everybody. If you take a look at our folder for today, so this is session 10, I think, I hope. So if we go down to session 10 and you look in your folder, you will see that there is take that back. In session 9, because this is what we didn't get to last week, there is a PDF in there called Extreme Color Methods, Color Correction Methods, I think is what it's called, Color Matching Methods. If you open this up, of all the PDFs that you keep, this is the one that you should definitely keep. This is actually a combination of some, basically, there's 2 or 3 techniques that I have written for this class. This is one of them. So you're not going to really find this anywhere else. You'll find bits and pieces of it, but this is, so at any rate, it is somewhat complicated and involved. I will just throw that right out here to begin with. But all you need to do is follow this recipe. It is a step-by-step recipe. That's all you need to do. And you will be able to achieve that. So we are going to do this rather quickly in class, but just know that this exists. But again, I can't stress the extreme part of this enough. You do not want to go through all of these steps for just a minor color correction or minor color matching. You've got your check layer will do that beautifully. I don't use this thing hardly at all, but when you need it, there's no other way to do it. Are we good on this part? Have I thrown enough disclaimers out there for you? Okay. Say what? By the way, there's a sign-in sheet going around someplace. Make sure you get on it. It's up here. You guys are really good about that. Okay, speaking of the recipe, I'm going to actually get there. I pretty much know it by heart, but I just want to make sure I don't stumble and fall. Okay, so anyway, I just want to point out that that's there. Okay, so the folder that we're going to work on, it is this Pix Imperfect Composite. So again, this is a person that I've talked to you guys about before. I'm going to open up my browser really quickly to just get you to Amisha's place. This is the #1 guy that I go to for stuff on YouTube that has to do with retouching. You can see I've actually got in my YouTube file, in my YouTube menu, drop-down menu, it's my 3rd one down. The first 2 are for me. Say what? Yeah. Anyway, I mean, this guy's insane. He's insane. He's insanely good, whatever. These are his files. The 2 files that we are going to work with right now are his files, and it was actually for a tutorial that he did on extreme color correction. Now, he does not use the same method that I use in this, but they were these perfectly suited files. But I believe in give credit where credit is due. You guys should subscribe to this guy's website. You should ring the bell. You should do the whole 9 yards. Anyway, so that's all I can say about that part. So I just want, again, it's important to give credit where credit is due, and I give this guy complete credit for a number of things. Again, the way we're going to do it is different than how he does it. Parts of it are the same, but parts of it are very, very different. All right, so at any rate, for what that's worth. So there are 2 files in that folder. There's one that's called Lady in Red and the other that's called Night Street. If you can select both of those and just drag them on top of Photoshop, some of you will have, if you just open it, will be able to, everything will open in Photoshop, but the JPEG actually might open up in Preview on Macintosh, so I don't want that part to happen. Again, I've got 2 different setups in here. So I've got this night scene, and then I've got a girl on a railroad tracks. Has everybody got this open? Let me know when you get it open. Say what? Oh yeah, if it's a profile mismatch, just say okay. It doesn't matter. All right, everybody got this part? Okay, so the first thing that I want to do really quickly is find out where... You guys good over there? I want to find out where the horizon line is for both of my images. Again, we need to match perspective in this, correct? So to find out, I'm going to start with the girl. I'm going to hit the P key to get the pen tool, and I'm just going to trace the railroad tracks. I am going to go to the pasteboard when I do this, because a lot of times you need to go beyond your image and put down a point when you're trying to find the horizon line. So hit the F key once, and it'll put it on the pasteboard, and then I'm simply going to click on one side of the rail with my pen tool. I'm going to then align the edge of my path so that it's running right along the outside edge of the railroad track, and I'm going to click and put down a spot there, and then I'm going to come down and click on the outside of the other railroad track. If this, before you click on it, if it gets too close and your points get confusing, you can always put another point outside here on the pin board so that your lines aren't all like too converging it, so you're not getting confused by what lines are actually tracing your converging lines and what are not. So then I'm going to put down another point on the other railroad track and actually take it all the way back, and again just take it back and forth so you see where they actually converge, and now I can see where my horizon line is, and it's right where her eyes are. Did that work for everyone? So again, converging lines in your image, where they intersect is the vanishing point. The vanishing point is always on the horizon line. So that's my horizon line for this image. Everybody good on that? Great. You can go to your path palette now and simply throw that path away. It's done its job. I don't need it anymore. I know that it's the vanishing point. The horizon line is right where her eyes are. So hit the F key to go to the black pasteboard, the F key one more time to go back. Now I need to do the same thing for the scene for my image in the street. So I need to do the same thing. The problem with the street, though, is that this is a very old city, and so I can't really trust the pavement line. So if you take a look at the pavers that are going along the street, they curve. There's no converging lines in there. However, the buildings actually give me converging lines. So in the building, what I do trust in this, I don't know how I feel about the stucco work that comes down. I'm not sure that I really trust that part, but I do trust the windows. I do believe that the windowsills will actually be the bottom of the sills will actually be level. I do believe that somebody went to that work, even if those windows are 600 years old, they made them level. So to do that, again, I'm going to go to the pasteboard, the F key once. I'm going to go to the top window. I'm going to click a point on the top windowsill right here. I'm going to drag out until it traces the top of the windowsill. I'm going to click and put down a point there, and then I'm going to come up to I don't really trust these older windows that are at the bottom of the other building, but I do trust the one that it's up at the very top that's right above the door. I'm going to click there and pull another line out on this one. And again, just make sure you're tracing the background part, and you'll see that you get converging lines that are sort of in the middle of the street. I do have my ruler showing, so I'm going to click and simply drag a guideline out of my ruler down to that intersection, and that is now the horizon line of my street scene. Did this work for everyone? Okie dokie. Again, I can throw this work path away. I just was using it to find where my converging lines met, which gave me the vanishing point, which sits on my horizon line. So now I know where that is. F key to go to the black pasteboard, F key again to go out. So now I'm going to go back to my image. I've already made you a selection of the girl. So if you go into your channels palette and the girl image, you will see that there's a channel called Knockout. Do not select it. Simply hover your cursor over the thumbnail, hold down the command key and click. It will load this as a selection. Come over to your layers palette. And we're simply going to add a layer mask to this. Again, it's non-destructive. It just separates the girl out. So she's relatively well knocked out. I haven't spent hours working on this one, but nonetheless, this is demo only. I'm going to then take again, if you are using tabbed behavior, this gets to be tricky. You can either tear both of your tabs off so that you can work with both images, or if you're really good and you know which image is which, you can click this layer and drag it to the opposite tab, however you want to work. But I'm going to click the layer of the girl and drag it on top of my city scene. But before I let go, I'm going to hold down the shift key to bring it in centered into the image. Do you have the girl knocked out? Can you see the city scene? Oh, sure. Okay. I've just got the girl. That's it. If you go to your channels palette, at the very bottom, you'll have the knockout already made for you. Hover over the thumbnail. Don't select it. Hover over the thumbnail, hold down the command key, and click. In your case, control key. Did it load it as a selection? You get marching ants, right? Then go to your layers palette, select it, and simply add a layer mask. The girl is now knocked out. Correct? Then take this layer, select the entire layer. I actually click on the girl to do it, and drag over on top of your city scene. But before you let go, hold down your shift key. This brings it in perfectly centered on your city scene. And you should now have the girl in the scene. You can then go back to the girl and close it up. You don't need it, don't save it, you don't need to do any of that stuff. It just gives us our where we're at here. I'm gonna double click on the hand then to get this image as big as I can get it. And this is now where I've actually got to work with. Does this make sense to everyone? Okay, so really quickly, I wanna scale the girl first. So I have a known scale in this building, and it's gonna be basically the door. That's where I'm gonna put her. So I've got the girl selected. I'm gonna hit the V key to get the move tool, and I'm simply going to drag her so that her feet are really close to the threshold of the door. We good on this part? Then I'm going to transform her, but really quickly, I'm going to turn her eyeball off so that I can see the door. If you zoom into this door, you will see there is an intercom right here. Where is an intercom? It's kind of like in your face, right? It's kind of like here. Maybe you come down just a little bit, but it's pretty close to this, right? It's not up here. It's not down here. It's kind of in here, right? So that's where I need to put a face. I know that, right? And it's the thinking about things that way. I can't trust the door. These are old doors. Doors in Italy, I'm guessing this is Italy. It could be France. But anyway, you know, they can be 15, 20 feet tall. So I don't trust the height of the door, but I know that the intercom is pretty much there. So that's how I'm going to size her. So I'm going to zip back out. I am going to transform the girl right now. So again, I've got the girl is layers selected, the pixel part is selected. It wouldn't really matter. I could have the mask selected as well, whatever, because they're anchored together. That's what the little chain link between the two is. So Command T to actually bring up the transform dialog box. But now I'm going to zip back out a little bit more. I can still do that with the tool there. I don't see my transform point just because I can't see. Where are you? Oh, there. That's why I couldn't see it, right? It's right on her face. So if I transform right now, what's going to happen is that everything is going to move towards her face because that's what is anchored. I don't want that. I want to anchor her feet because her feet are on the threshold. So grab the anchor point and just drop it right down onto her feet. And now when I do my transform, she will shrink down, but her feet won't move from the threshold. So it's just faster. So then I'm going to click on the link between my width and height in my options bar that's up at the top. I'm going to hover over the H. I'm going to click and drag down to make her smaller. And I need to make her small enough so that her face is roughly where that intercom thing is. So in my case, it was a reduction of 52%. If you guys want the exact same number that I've got, that's how small she actually needs to be in this space. Now, the problem that I have is that we know where her horizon line is. We now know where the horizon line of the background is. To get these two to match up, you can go ahead and say okay to this. So go ahead and click on the check mark to commit that transform because she's scaled right. But she is totally out of perspective, and I can't get her in perspective. Again, if we go back, the person who shot the street scene is relatively low to the ground. The person who shot the girl in the train is standing up on a ladder or up on a bridge or something looking down on her. There is a mismatch of perspective here that I cannot fix. Because it would mean this, to actually get the two to be correct, I would have to move the girl down like this so that she's lined up for that, but this makes her 2.5 feet tall. So it's never going to be a perfect thing. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo it, but at least keeping her scaled correctly, at least will give me my best shot. So I'm going to move her into the middle of the street. So hit the V key to get the move tool. Hold down your shift key so that she will only travel either directly left or right or straight up and down. That's it. The shift key trick is just a restriction. You can't move her at a diagonal. And I'm just going to bring her into the middle of the street. And then I am going to transform her in perspective. But I'm going to pull another line down that would actually be the horizon line for the girl. I'm going to put it right in the middle. I'm going to just split the difference here in terms of what I use as my anchor point to scale this girl in perspective. So does this make sense, everybody, where we are so far? Are we good? Okay, so with the girl selected, make this a little bit smaller. With the girl selected, the top layer, Command-T to bring up the transform dialog box, you can see that the anchor point, and it's just a coincidence that the anchor point lands right on her face. I'm going to bring it down so that the anchor point is right between the two, which puts the anchor point right at the base of her neck. And then I just want to bring her closer to me. I want to make her bigger. So I'm going to zip back out, and then to transform in perspective, once you have set your anchor point on our new artificial horizon line, again, it's neither one. It's not the street horizon line, it's not the girl. Sometimes if you put it right in the middle, which is what I'm going to try, it works. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you guys have just got to make these judgments yourself. We are being forced to deal with an issue that we cannot fix, because the only way to fix this is to reshoot one or the other. It is the only way to do it. Or come up with a different background or a different girl. They were shot out of radically different perspectives, and there's no trick in Photoshop that will shoehorn that in any other way. So anyway, this is where I'm going to do it. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and the Option key, and grab the transform corner that's in the lower right-hand corner to me, and I'm simply going to pull to bring her a little bit more forward. And I'm going to leave it right there. So she's come more towards the camera. She is taller. Do I believe this? Yeah, sure, it looks good enough for me, whatever. I'm going to say okay to that. And this is where we're going to begin. I don't like my guidelines. Again, I know all the information that I have. If I want to just keep the guidelines but don't want to see them, hit Command-H. It will temporarily hide those. And so this is my move to actually do this. And you can see what my problem is. This is a radical color shift in this. But my first question to you is, what about the lighting? Specifically the direction. Specifically the fact that the street scene is all being lit from the left side and the girl's being lit from the right side. Who picked up on that? Who is not looking? All that list that I gave you for this shit is the first things that you should be looking at. The shadow is on this side of the girl. She is flipped the wrong way for the lighting. So to fix that, with the girl actually selected, up to the image menu, the edit menu, down to transform, down to flip horizontal, and throw her the other direction. Now immediately, even though the color is so off, doesn't it look like she just got put into that scene because the lighting direction now matches? Are we good on this part? Okay, this is where it gets a little hairy. I need everybody to go out and you need to launch a browser. So I do Chrome as much as I really don't like Google. I am going to do this with Chrome. It's the browser that I use. So I need everybody to go to a browser right now, and you are going to do a Google search for Adobe Color. So again, I'm just going to do a new dialog box, Adobe Color, and say okay. And it should take you to this thing where it's a color palette generator. In the old days, if you guys go back far enough, probably 2 or 3 years, whatever, they used to call, I think the people at Adobe, I think the engineers get together all on a weekend and they drink a lot and do a couple of hits of ecstasy and then try to think about shit to do. And during one of those raves, they actually decided that we're going to call it Color with a K. So there was this Adobe product called Color, K-O-L-O-R. And it's this program that I'm going to show you right now. They somehow, the powers to be at Adobe woke up and said, that's just stupid. So at any rate, click on this. It'll take you to, typically of Adobe, it'll probably try to sell you something right away. If not, hopefully you come to this page. If you don't come to this page, did everybody get to this page? Yep. What you're really looking for is this extract theme. There are pages that will come up and it'll say, do you want to do color wheel? Do you want to do palettes? We're going to do extract theme. So if you get a different Google page that opens up and gives you options for this, just click on the extract theme. But you can click on, to be honest with you, any of them because they all are these tabs right up here. We are going to click on the second from the left tab, not the color wheel, but the extract theme. And you will see it says, to extract the color from an image and save it as a color palette, drag and drop your file here. That's what we're going to do. You need to go back and find the street scene that was in your color, the night scene, and we are going to do a drag and drop of that night scene onto that page. So I'm going to grab my night scene. Oh, come on. And voila, you should get something that looks like this. Did everybody get this? So the reason I do this is that you can do this manually. You can do this by yourself. You can just go in and say, what are the dominant colors in here? And I want to pick 5 of them. You can get away occasionally with only doing 3. Some people will do 7. I don't like even numbers, so I would never do 4 or 6. That's just how I feel. 5 has usually worked pretty well for me. It's going to work well in this case. So, but you can see it's actually brought your image in. It's giving you a set of color palettes that are down on the bottom. And I look at this and I say, well, okay, but I don't need the sky in this. I don't need, there's a color spot that's up at the very top in the middle, and it's just the sky. It's the night sky. I don't need that. That's not part of my color palette. What I need is the color of the actual street scene. And what I'm missing in that street scene is a deep shadow in the street scene. I have, what you're looking for in this color palette range is you are looking for a gradient. You are looking for a deep color, a really light color, and then something that's in the middle, and then one on either side between the middle and the light and the middle and the dark. Does that sort of make sense? So I'm looking for 5-step gradient that goes from the darkest to my lightest. That's basically what I'm looking for, but also deals with the color. So for instance, there's a light bulb in here that is almost white. I don't want to pick that. That's not a dominant player. That yellow that cast on the side of the building is a major player, and that's what's on this point right now. But the one that's on the night scene is not. So I'm going to click on the little circle that is the night scene, and I'm going to drag it to the lower corner of the street and let go. This is now remapped that color to this color swatch that's right here. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, you could go from this point right on, but I am anal enough to say that I want my color to truly be a gradient going from darkest to lightest. So you can reorder this stuff. If you click on the, for instance, I'm going to click on the yellow and I'm going to drag it all the way to the right. So I'm going to go from darkest on my left to lightest on my right. Then I've got another color that's right next to it that's actually the second darkest color. So I'm going to drag it down so it's next to this. And then I've got the mismatch in the middle. So I'm going to drag this up. So now I'm starting from dark to a darker gray. I mean a really dark, almost black, to a dark brown, to a medium brown, to a light brown, to a yellow. Did that work for everyone? Okay, so this is where it gets tricky. You need to come up. You have to do this before we do our next step. You need to come up to that little blue circle that's up at the top and make sure that you are logged in. If you are not logged in, we cannot get to your library. So if you see it like my name right here, I am logged in. If you are not, you need to log in right now. Is everybody logged in? Does everybody see their name up here? We good? Okay, great. Also, a couple of other things to look around here. In the extraction method, I always leave mine as colorful. That actually gives me the most saturated colors, and it allows me to work with that. It's easier for me to desaturate a color than it is for me to bump the saturation on it, so I get the colorful model of it. It also splits your colors apart so that you really get the sort of the whole rainbow of it, if that's possible to say. Okay, we'll do that part. Okay, so then I am selected, I am in here. Then you need to come up to right, you'll see your color swatch. There's a sort of a thumbnail of it sitting right up here. Right underneath this, it says a save to, and there's a drop-down menu. In that drop-down menu, you need to pick my library. It is your library, not mine, but you need to pick that because that's how we are going to access it in Photoshop. Yes? Oh, I'm working, I downgraded my version of Photoshop. This is maybe another feature. We're going to find out right now. We're going to find out. So at any rate, I'm going to pick my library because that's what mine is called. You should pick your library because how bad could that be if Adobe really did that? Yeah, I'm going to get your, no, anyway. All right, so pick either my library or your library. And then you need to check to make sure that the name means something to you. So this is the color theme, and you'll see it's already tagged color theme of the night scene. That's the name of the image that we're doing here. So that part is correct. So then we are going to hit the save button, and we're going to find out right now. So did you get a theme successfully saved to your library? All right, well then we're going to find out now if we can get to your library. So the next thing to do is click on libraries and pray to God you have something under here that says your library. You did? Perfect. I'm going to go to my library because that's where mine is. If you click on this drop-down menu and open it up, you should actually see it sitting right there. So has everybody got this thumbnail? Are we good on this part? Terrific. Okay, so I'm going to click on this to actually make it active, and you should get it to open up big like this. And you have options on the side, and the options on the side over here, you want to pick the one at the very top, download as ASE. And I used to know what ASE stands for, but it's Adobe Swatch something. Anyway, did everybody find that part? All right, so you want to click on that, and it's going to open up a window, and it'll say, okay, we're going to name this thing whatever. You want to save this with your image. So mine already knows where I was. You need to navigate to that Piximperfect composite folder in our session number 9, and you want to save this file in with those other 2 images that we've already got in there, the lady in red and the night street scene, and hit save. Now that seems like a lot of work. Just wait. All right, is everybody good on this part? Did that work for everyone? Exactly. Yep, that's where you want to put it. So then if you go there, if you go down to your image and you take a look, you should see it in there, and mine's not in there, so it could be in the one that's in my teacher folder. Yep, so that's where mine is right here. So you should have this ASE file. Yes? It's not downloading? So back into Photoshop, folks. Okay, once we're back into Photoshop, we need to actually bring this in to Photoshop so that we can actually work with it. So to do that, we are going to open up, again, it's something that's usually in Photoshop in the default version of it, but we threw it away when we rebuilt this workspace that we're in. We need to temporarily bring it back. So go up to your window menu, click on the window menu, and you want to come down to swatches. So again, take a look at my screen really quickly, up to the window menu, down to swatches. These are all your palettes. You'll see there's check marks next to all the ones that are visible. There is not a check mark next to the swatches one. We need to put it there, and it will actually open up. And you can move this guy around. You can do all sorts of things with it. I've already got one in here from a while back, so I'm going to get rid of it right now. So mine looks like yours. So, and then it should open up and look basically something like this. Everybody good in this part? Okay, we need to then bring this in to our swatches. So to do that, you come to the little menu that's to the right of the tab that says swatches. Click on it and come down, and we are going to do import swatches. So that's what this is right here. And let go. And then you need to navigate and find that file, that ASE file. So go to your Piximperfect composite folder, click on this file and open it. And after all of that work, at the very bottom of your swatches list, you should see, in my case, it's an Adobe Color, Color Theme, Night. And if you click it open, you can see that gradient, those 5 swatches that we just pulled in. So this will work for any image that you combo that you actually do. So this is now the dominant colors of this image that we are going to use. So now we actually need to then use this as a way almost. We Was everybody else able to import this thing? Was anybody else not? Oh, can you drag and drop? Yeah. Because that maybe that's maybe her issue. So just drag and drop onto the palette. Drag and drop it on the palette, right?
Right at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, just drag and drop it. So like,
Well, can you try and see if we can get that really quick? And if it doesn't work, we will figure out why not. I pick it for the shape of the bottle. It's narrower than most. Any luck? Nope. We will figure it out. All right, moving on for everyone else. I'm sorry about that, but anyway. So to use this thing, we are going to create what they call a gradient map. Now, a gradient map is a different animal than a gradient. So if you come over to your layers palette, so go ahead and click on, make sure that the top layer is active, which is the girl. Come down to add an adjustment layer, the circle with the half black, half white. Click on this. You'll see that there is a gradient, but there's also a thing called gradient map. We want to do a gradient map. We are going to use these colors to build a gradient that will then map these colors to this image. So go ahead and select gradient map. Usually what happens is you get a black and white. That's kind of the standard. You don't need to worry about this because again, we're going to change the entire map, so that part doesn't matter. But before we do that, you need to do two things. The first one is you need to click on the blending mode of your gradient map and change it from normal down to color. And then the second thing you need to do is you need to clip this. This is exactly the same work we did with all our adjustment layers when we were using check layers. You have to set the blending mode to control only the thing that you want to change. In this case, it's the color. But then also you need to clip it to the girl so that the mask of the girl controls where the map is actually applied. We are not trying to change the color of our background. We are trying to change the color of the girl only. So if you hover between both of the layers, between the gradient adjustment layer and the girl, hold down the Option key, your cursor will turn into a little square with an arrow that goes counterclockwise. Click on that and it will then clip this. You will see that that whole adjustment layer shoves over to the right, and all of a sudden the girl is the only thing that's in black and white and the background is his normal color. Did that work for everyone? Okay, now we need to build the map itself. To do that, if you look up at the very top in your properties panel, there's a really giant ass gradient up there. You need to actually click on that and it will open up the gradient editor. And if you take a look under the gradient editor, you will actually see there is a gradient that has got a black stop on one side and a white one on the other side. Now, if you have different colors, don't worry about it. We're going to change them all. But does anybody have more than two colors? Most of you should have black and white. But even if you have color, do you have more than two? Okay, so this part's fine here. So this is how we're going to start. The first thing we're going to do is actually set our highlight color. So to do that, you'll see that there are little stops, what they call stops, that are underneath this gradient. There's only two of them. What it's saying is that I want everything in my image to go from black to white and all of the shades of gray that are in between. So if you click on this white patch, so again, the stop itself, you want to click on that just once, you will see that it activates the color down in the very bottom. So all it's doing is it's showing you this color in the little part that says color. Yes? It doesn't matter. Just pick the one that's on the, so I think Johnny's is reversed, so the image is flipped. It doesn't matter. Pick on the color picker that is all the way to, the color stop that's all the way to the right. All the way to the right. We're going to start with highlights and work our way down to shadows. Okay, so click on that one. You now have a color swatch that's been loaded in here. Click on the color swatch. It will open up the color picker. And then come over and you want to click on your yellow color. And when you do that, it will load the yellow color into your color picker. It also load it into the gradient. But before you close this up, you need to look at the brightness level right here. In my case, it's a 95. It's a brightness of 95. Is yours close? Yours should be close. Then go ahead and say okay to this. And then you need to put in the location is the brightness, 95. So type in 95 right here in location. You will see that that moved your color stop slightly away from the 100%, which would have been pure white. Does that make sense, everybody? Did this work for everybody? Okay, we're now going to do the shadow color. So this color stop at the other end. Click on it. You will notice that the color swatch changes again to a much darker color. Click on this. It will open up the color picker. Again, now you want to hover over the shadow color that we picked in our gradient. Click on that. Notice where the brightness is. Mine is 6%. Yours should be close. Say OK. And then type in a color location of 6. So now we've got our extreme ends, but now we need the ones that are in the middle. You can add stops and you can subtract stops. So you'll also notice that there is a little diamond that's right in the middle. This little diamond controls the transition. It's the transition point. So it's just saying, what we're saying is that, okay, I want the little diamond to be exactly in the middle between the shadow color that I picked and the highlight color that I picked. That's all it is. You can adjust this. In our case, there's no reason to adjust this. It will automatically always go right between the two stops that we add, which gives you a smoother gradient. That's the whole point. So don't fuck around with the little diamond. So To add another color point, I'm just going to start working on my shadow point and work my way up to the highlights. Simply hover over. You just need to be, you look at my screen to see where I'm at. I'm not going to be really close to this guy, although it doesn't matter because I'm going to change the location anyway. I'm just going to click another point right here. I'm just going to click. I'm not clicking on the gradient. I'm clicking right underneath it, and it gives you another color picker point. Color stop. Click on the color stop to make sure it loads the color that you want. It's the color of that stop. Click on this to open up the color picker, and we're now going to pick our second from left color in our gradient, the one that is more like a dark reddish brown. I'm going to click on that. It's going to load it. Again, I'm going to look at my brightness. It's 25. That is going to be my location. Say OK, and in location, type in 25. Did that work for everyone? You will now see that you've got another little diamond that's giving you the transition midpoint between these two, which is exactly what you want. We're going to add another point now, moving towards the middle of my gradient. So just hover underneath it, click to add another point. Click on that to actually get the color picker, to get it the color it is. Click on the color to open up the color picker, and I'm now going to do the middle of my colors. And notice that my brightness now is 45%, so I'm going to say OK to that and type 45 into my location. And I'm going to do one more, so I'm just going to click up sort of in between, right between that midpoint and my highlight point. Click on the color picker to open this up. Click on my last color, the one that's just to the left of my my lightest color. Look at my brightness, it's 65%. I'm going to say OK to that and type in 65 as my location. This is now my brand new gradient. Make sense? And then simply say OK. Now, in looking at this, it's too strong. You can get rid of your swatches now. You can simply close that up. They've done their work. This is actually too strong. So to drop down its intensity, remember, we did the colorful version of this. Just grab the opacity slider and start to pull it down. And you'll see as we start to return some of the color to her, this part actually works and it looks great. But I'm going to show you another trick, because right now, so everybody got her kind of yellowish, right? Sort of? Okay. So to trick this out now, I'm going to run my check layers right now. So go to your actions palette, find your check layer action group, click on it and run it. And the first thing that I'm going to do adjust is the color. So I've got my color actually sitting up at the very top to have the check layers on that I want you to have on. Make sure that up at the very top, you don't want your luminosity check layer on, you don't want your saturation one on, you want the one at the very top, the two at the very top. You want the color one and the hue saturation layer that at the very top. And you should have something that looks like this, right? So then go back to your gradient map. Click on the gradient map to make it active, and I want you to adjust just the opacity slider. Crank it all the way up to 100. So when we crank it up to 100, you can see that the girl is not really the color. I mean, she's close. She's much closer than the scene. If you turn off the eyeball of your gradient map, you'll see she's way out of whack. So this gets us closer there. But look at all these dark reds that are actually happening in the scene. I don't have any of that in the girl. I do have some of the greens. I do have a lot of the oranges in here, but I don't have a lot of the yellow in here. So if you then start to drop the opacity of your gradient map the way we did just visually before, you'll see she starts to get closer to this scene. But as you get down to like around an 80%, look what happens. No matter how much I push this down, she's not changing that radically. I've got to go all the way from 80s all the way down into like the 40s or the 50s to get her to change again. This is telling me that roughly around that 80%, somewhere 75, 80, whatever, this is the sweet spot for this amount of opacity on here based on my check layer. Is this working for you guys? Then simply turn off your check layer for color. So this is where we are right now. But again, all I've done here is adjust color. I now need to do my other check layers, which we are going to do right now. Remember, this is close to color, but she looks too light to me in this, just to be honest with you guys. That's the way I feel about it. To find out, turn on your luminosity check layer, and you can see there's absolutely no way. She's way too light in here. So to fix that, make sure that your gradient map is selected because we need to put an adjustment layer on top of it. So come down to your adjustment layers. We are going to add just a regular curve to the top of this. I need to change the blending mode of that curve from normal down to luminosity. Again, that's all we're doing here is changing the luminosity. Then I need to hover between the curve that I'm working on right now and the gradient map because I need to clip this to the girl. Hover between those two adjustment layers, hold down your option key, you get the funny little square with the arrow going counterclockwise. Click to clip this to the girl. So now I've got an luminosity adjustment layer that is only going to impact the girl. But now a lot of you guys would say, well, okay, this is light, it's too light, so I'm just gonna grab this curve in the middle and pull down. The problem is that that is not what's really going on in this scene. In this scene, we need to drop all of the highlights down as well as the rest of the figure. This is pinning my highlights up to that same point. So look at her face. That's not gotten any darker, just the whole midtones and the shadows have gotten darker. That will not work. Tear this point off if you did that. Instead, you grab the white point slider of your curve and you simply start to pull this down. The advantage of this is that you are actually now dropping the highlights down more than you are the shadows and the midtones. So this is exactly what we want, and I'm going to continue to drag this down, and I'm really primarily looking at her face. I'm not really looking at her skirt, her dress, whatever. I'm primarily looking at her face, and I feel like this one's actually, it's gotten down, it feels pretty good to me. Turn off your luminosity check layer, and then turn this curve on and off, and you can say, yeah, that feels right to me. It feels like tonally it's right. Now, I think that the bottom of her dress is way too light. It's throwing me off, but the rest of this part looks good to me. Is everybody sort of where I'm at here? Are we good on this part? Okay, so the last two things we're gonna do is we're going to deal with the dress itself. So to do that, we're going to add a whole nother curve onto this. So again, come down to your layers palette at the very bottom. We're going to add an adjustment layer. We are going to add a curve. Again, we need to change the blending mode from normal down to luminosity. We're just going to make the lower part, we're going to relight her. We're going to make the lower part of her dress much darker. So again, I'm going to change it to luminosity. I'm going to hover between both the curve that I'm working on right now and the one I just finished making to clip this. Hold down the option key and click to actually clip it down. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm actually going to pull this highlight part down, and I'm simply going to try to make, I take that back, I don't like that part. I'm going to grab the middle and try, because I'm really going after, I don't want to kill more highlights in here. I want to just darken everything down. It's really more her dress that I'm going after. So I'm just watching the dress part right here, and I've pulled mine down. If you want the exact same numbers I've got an input of 157 and an output of 108. But I can go back in and adjust this later. So it's made everything really dark. I'm then going to invert my layer mask. So make sure that the mask is selected, hit Command I. It just makes a black layer mask. So now the next move is I want to control where the darkness actually happens. The best way you can do this is to go to the pasteboard now, because we may have to get a brush outside of our image to do this. So hit the F key to get to the pasteboard. I'm going to make my image a little bit smaller. And then I'm going to grab a brush. The B key, make sure that it is a completely soft brush because we want as much gradient in this as we can. Make sure your blending mode is normal. Make sure that your opacity is 100 and your flow is 100, and white is going to be my foreground color. So what I want to do here is I want to actually start her dress to get darker right underneath her boobs, but I want it to be the very darkest at her feet. So to do that, you need to make a brush big enough so that the center of the brush is right at her feet and the edge of the brush is right underneath her boobs. So I'm going to hover my brush down at the bottom of her feet and use my bracket keys to make it bigger. And as soon as I get to the point where it just touches the underside of her boobs, this is now the right size brush for me. And then click once. Don't click and drag, just click once. and it made the bottom part of it darker. Now it's not dark enough for me, but look at what that did for her arms. That is actually a really pretty transition. I'm going to do the same trick again. I've already got a curve that is set up to do the majority of this work anyway. I could go in, if I felt like I wanted it darker around her arms, I could go back into my curve and change it, but I'm not done yet. I want to go ahead and make the bottom of her dress even darker. So I'm simply going to duplicate this layer that I'm on right now, Command J. When you do that, you will see that it puts the same gradient on there. I don't want the same gradient on there. I'm going to do a much smaller one, and it also unclips it. So it does keep the luminosity blending mode. That part's good, but I'm going to hover now between this new curve that I just added to clip it. So I'm going to hover between it and the curve underneath it, hold down my Option key, click to clip it, and then I'm going to fill this gradient mask with black. So again, keyboard shortcut for that. In my case, black is my background color. So Command Delete will actually do that. If you cannot remember that part, simply come up to your Edit menu, down to Fill. In the Fill dialog box that opens up, select black, normal blending mode, 100% opacity, and say OK. You'll get to the same place I am. So now what I want to do is I want to increase how dark this gets from her knees to her feet. So again, I'm going to put my brush right at her feet, the center of my brush right at her feet, because that is where my brush will be at its most extreme. The edge of the brush is where it's going to be at its least extreme. So I'm going to make my brush now smaller so that the edge of the brush happens right about her knees, right under the fold, sort of where the shadow of the flowers are. That's where I'm going to do it. White is my foreground color. Click once. That's all you needed to do on this. Is this now looking more believable to everyone? So now we're going to gild the lily. We need a shadow on this to finish this out. So come down, click on the background layer. Again, I put my shadows on top of the background, but underneath the figure. So on the background layer, click to make it active, then click to add an empty layer above it. So the square with the little plus in the middle. The square with a little plus in the middle, I'm going to rename it Shadows, or Shadow. Hit the G key to get the gradient tool. Up at the options bar at the very top, click on the drop-down menu and make sure that you are doing a classic gradient, not a regular gradient. Then in the icon right next to it, the big sort of stripe that's a preview of your gradient, click on that to open that up. In the presets, you are going to open the basics group, and you're going to click on the one that's right in the middle, which is foreground to transparency. If white is your foreground color, don't worry, pick the same gradient, and then we'll just hit the X key to make black your foreground color. And then say OK to that. And then finally, in the 5 types of gradient that are up in the options bar, you want to click the second from the left, which is the circular gradient. We've done this 2 times now before this, so you guys should be somewhat familiar with this. So it is a circular gradient. So then I'm simply going to click and drag down to get a gradient, circular gradient blotch on my image. Hit Command T to transform that gradient. I want to crush this gradient so that it's more pancake-like. So I'm going to grab the center, the control handle in the middle, either the top or the bottom, it doesn't matter. Hold down your Option key because that will move both of the handles at the same time, so you don't have to do one and then the other and then the other and the other and that. Anyway, so hold down the Option key, click, flatten this thing out a little bit. Do not hover too close to your anchor point because otherwise you'll move the anchor point. Instead, hover to the side of it so that you can move the gradient, and we are going to drop this right underneath the girl. Then we are going to, my gradient is too wide, so I'm going to grab the control handle on the right side, and again, hold down the Option key and click. It will pull it in on both sides. And then I'm also going to crush it a little bit more. And then I'm going to hit the check mark and say OK. Double click on the hand. Voila. Yeah, you go into a job interview for this and show somebody that shit, they won't hire you because they're too ashamed to have somebody that fucking good in their shop that's so much better than them, because nobody knows this shit. But look at this, guys. Are you out of your minds? I'm telling you right now, you walk your computer out to anybody in the, well, there won't be anybody in the, you walk this out to anybody in the computer lounge and say, you know, I shot this picture when I was in Italy last week, and I just, you know, there's something wrong about it. I don't know what it is. I mean, what do you think? And they'll start going into all sorts of things like, oh, well, you should crop it this way, and you know, oh yeah, well, you know, anyway. Look at this. You guys should be ecstatic about this. I mean, about about you did this. Everybody in this room, you did this. And you should be thrilled about that. You should be. Okay. Hit the F key. In spite of all of that work, I'm just going to close mine up. You don't need to save it. If you want to, go ahead. It's your work. You did a good job. Okay. So, we've only got a short amount of time left and quite a bit to get through. So, a hard 5 minutes. Be back at 4:20. Okay, so likely the last thing we're going to get to today is Puppet Warp. So, anybody in this room ever use Puppet Warp? Yeah, what'd you do with it? Oh, okay, no, again, it works. Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that there's something other than, so again, we're going to use this to modify bodies, but unlike the Liquify tool, this isn't going to be about, you know, putting people on diets or changing noses or that kind of stuff, whatever. It's just going to be about reshaping figures so that hopefully if you run into a situation where you have a composite and you need to so the way I always refer to it is like this. If you've got a composite, let's say I'm the composite, you're going to hear this, you won't see it on the video, but you've got a composite and it's me like this, but you want me to really interact with the scene that I'm in. Wouldn't it be better if I could actually change this hand to do this? Right? Or if I was worried about this, if all of a sudden it was like you saw my hand in the front here, but it clearly can't be in the front, whatever, wouldn't it be great if I could put it back here, that kind of stuff. So it's really going to be more about that stuff. So there is no assignment per se that well, there is. I'm ahead of myself, so I'm going to just shut up. All right, so to get to it, we are into session 10 now, so go to your session 10 files. And inside your session 10 files, there should be a folder called Puppet Warp. And inside that Puppet Warp, there should be a figure. It's called a Puppet Warp with figure something in here. Let me see what it actually says. Yeah, Puppet Warp figure. Just double click on that to open it up. This is actually a figure that we were using in another image. And do you guys have this sort of like junk that's on the bottom of your image? Yeah, okay, we're going to clean all of that part out. So I just want to make sure everybody's good on that part. So if you've got this image open, go ahead and collapse the figure. And then you will see, once the figure group is collapsed, you should have a couple of shadows that are not turned on. And I also want you to go ahead and leave the background on for the time being right now. We're going to simply add a layer mask to this figure. So with the figure group selected, click on Add Layer Mask. And then we're going to take a brush, the B key, make it smaller. We're just going to mask that part out. So I'm going to hit the X key to make black my foreground color. Normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow. For work like this, you want to make sure that your brush is completely hard so you don't accidentally overspray into the girl, and then simply kill those two things so that we can get rid of them. At this stage of the game, I also want you to turn off the white background and should just have a floating girl in space. Everybody got this part? Okay, great. We are going to then make a merged copy of this just so that I have a single thing to work with on this girl. So to do that, Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E will give you a merged stamped version of this girl up on top. Again, for the Windows people, it's Control Alt, Shift, E. I just know where the keys are.
Control Alt Shift.
Is it? Yeah, it should be Control Alt Shift and the letter E.
Okay, got
Did you get a copy of this? Just girl, like just it's the whole thing. It's not the group. Yeah. So hold down. So do you have just here? Let me go back. Did you get rid of those two things that are on the floor? Here, hang on. So make sure that you turn the eyeball of your figure group off. Not the new one that we've made, but the one underneath it. Because once we start to actually shift this girl around, you'll see the old one, which will get really confusing. So again, for me, I've got to make it again. Command Option Shift the letter E. Turn off the figure underneath it, the figure group. And then on this top layer up here, we want to make this a smart object. So with this layer 1, the figure, on this transparent background, come up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, over to convert to smart object. And we are ready to rock. Everybody got this part? You can see the little icon in the lower right hand corner telling you that this indeed is a smart object. So to use Puppet Warp, it's in the edit menu. So come up to the edit menu. It's near the transform group. So come down, it's kind of in the middle, and it says Puppet Warp. And it'll open you up into a new space. Now in this new space, it doesn't look like a whole lot has changed, but we do have a different, a whole set of things that are sitting up in the options bar up at the very top. The first one I want you to click on is this Show Mesh. So right in the middle of the very top, it should be Show Mesh, and it'll look like there's a spider web that got put on top of this girl. You maybe, when you opened yours up, already had this. If you already had it, that's fine. Once we start doing the Puppet Warp, we're going to want to not see it. So you can uncheck that as well so that you don't see it. But in our case, we're going to leave it that way. Are you good on this, Gwen? So I did, hang on one second. So did you turn your image into your layer into a smart object? Yep. Good, okay. Then up to the edit menu, down to Puppet Warp. Okay, all right. So, and then click on Show Mesh. So it looks like there's a spider web on this girl. So the thing about the spider web, this is how Puppet Warp works. It's not like, remember when we were talking about how Liquify works? That Liquify, the way it was, is it was as if there was a screen that you then slapped your image onto. You glued your image to this screen, and then you distorted the screen. That's how the whole Liquify tool works. That's what the mesh is called. That screen is called a mesh. The way Puppet Warp works is it's very different. The way Puppet Warp works is it's more like there's a spider web that has covered this person. And that if you move any part of the spider web, it moves the whole spider web. So this isn't like you're distorting just a little part of this mesh. You're distorting everything. So you need to think of it that way. It's connected. So what the mesh does is it controls how fine those movements or those distortions can be. So The average is a normal mesh, which is what this is. You can do more points, which creates a finer mesh, and then you can do fewer points, which is a coarser mesh. The only reason you want to change those would be the processing power of your computer. This is incredibly processor intensive. So when we go to do this, I've got a relatively good processor in mind, so I always go to more points for my spider web and because I get finer control. The thing is that you've got to make that decision at this point, because if you start doing your puppet warp and then you change the number of points, you will change the entire aspect of the mesh, and it will then, just clicking on that will distort your image even further. It will do shit that you don't want to be done, right? So in my case, I am going to select, first off, actually, hang on one second. I'm going to cancel this because I realized really quickly, you remember that problem, I think it may be, that I showed with Gwen last week, where she was in Liquify and she got that whole like pixelated screen effect, whatever. That happened to me last night. So I turned off my support for graphics processor, which I'm turning on right now. That's why my computer has been lagging so bad. So anyway, now I'm going to go back into Puppet Warp and hopefully it'll go much faster. So edit menu, down to Puppet Warp, show mesh. I'm going to change my density from this normal drop down to more points, and you'll see there's a whole lot more points on my image right now, and a whole lot of more points, the little lines that are connecting it. Did that happen to everyone? Okay, you can turn off your show mesh right now. You don't need to see it. It's there, and it'll actually do its job. I'm going to zoom in. You can still use your same keyboard shortcuts to zoom in. I'm going to zoom in so that I can sort of see her waist and her her left arm. It's actually her right arm, but it's on the left side for us. And right at her elbow, I'm going to click once. And you'll see it puts down a single point. This is supposed to be, what this is supposed to look like, it's supposed to be a push pin. The way you're supposed to be thinking of this right now is that this is an artboard that we are working on, and we have just put in a push pin on our figure, and it is pinning this point to that artboard, and it cannot move. So then we're going to come over to her other side. I'm going to go over to her hand on the complete opposite side, and I'm going to click and I'm going to put down another pinpoint. This has also now been pinned. What you'll notice about this one, though, is it's got a little dot in the center and the other one doesn't. This little dot in the center says, okay, you've got a push pin put in here, but we haven't jammed it all the way in yet. It's not connected to the artboard. And you'll see when you hover over it, it looks like your cursor turns into a little thing that looks like a push pin. However, the one that we set in the very beginning is anchored and pushed down. So now if you click this second point that we put and just start to rotate up to the top, you will see that the entire figure rotates around the pin that is stuck into the pin board. And the entire image moves, because you are moving the entire spider web. This is not Liquify. This is not a mesh that you're distorting. You are moving this entire collected, she is in this cocoon, and you are moving the whole cocoon. It's the best analogy that I can make to this. Does this make sense to everyone? Command Z does work in here, so hit Command Z to get rid of that. I do want to get rid of this point that I just added. So if you hover over the point, again, I want to get rid of the one that's on her hand. You cannot tear this thing off. If you actually try to, you're just going to move the whole cocoon again. So instead, when you hover over it like this, hold down your Option key, and you'll see that you get a little circle temporarily, and then a pair of scissors. Click on the scissors, and it gets rid of the point. So now we've gotten rid of this point, and now I can actually do something constructive with this. I actually want to bend her elbow so that it looks like she's touching her ass. That's the only way I can put it, so I don't know. But anyway, that's what I'm going to go for here. So I'm going to come down, and I'm actually going to click and put a point at her wrist, and then I'm going to try to do the same thing. I'm going to then move this point closer to her butt. So if I do this, she just rotates around the whole pin again. That's not what I wanted to do. So hit Command Z to undo that. Instead, we need to pin the rest of her body so that the only thing that moves is the part that has not been pinned. So to do the rest of her body, come up to her shoulder, left shoulder, hit a pin, right at the base of her neck, hit another pin, other shoulder, hit another pin, down to her wrist on her other arm, another pin, to the ring, another pin, 2 or 3 pins across her waist. Scroll down, I need a set of pins that are underneath. Remember, if I don't pin this down and I go to move something, now it'll be pretty slight, but if I were to move this right now, her feet are still not pinned down, they would move. So then I'm going to put another pin at her ankle, one at her heel, and one at her toe. So now, and I'm actually going to put another pin right in her head, so right in her forehead. So at this stage of the game, I can then go back to the pin that is at her wrist on the left-hand side. I'm going to click on that. You'll see it's got the little white dot in it, which means I can move it, but everybody else is a black dot. They will not move. And now I can click and drag this, and I can actually bend her arm so that it goes right behind her booty. Did that work for everyone? Okay, now in my case, I feel like it's made her arm too bendy. She looks like Gumby, right? So to fix that, I can actually put another pin right here in the middle. So I'm going to put a pin right between her wrist and her elbow. I can click on that, again, let go. It's got the white point in it, everybody else is pinned, and now I can actually push it out so that it reshapes her arm. But look what happens to her hand. Her hand angle changes because her hand is not pinned down. Now, I'm okay with where her hand is right now, but does this make sense to what's going on here with everyone? Are we good on this part? So then go ahead and click at the very top. You will see there's a series of icons in your options bar at the very top. One of them is it's like a line with an arrow going counterclockwise. What that does is that it just will it will remove all of the pins, but you will stay in Puppet Warp. If you go to the next one over, the one in the middle, the one that's got the circle with the X in it, it will get rid of all the pins and then get you out of Puppet Warp, and nothing will change. If you want to go ahead and commit the Puppet Warp, you click on the check mark. And so if you click on the check mark, it goes ahead and it actually does the warp. And this is the difference that you've actually got. If you do Command Z, you'll see the undo, and the Command Z again will bring it back. Now, that's pretty amazing, I think, in my book. But now you say to yourself, well, yeah, that's all well and good, but I didn't really want her hand back on the back. I really wanted the hand more on the top of her thigh. I didn't want her scratching her booty. I wanted it on the top of her thigh, right? So this is a smart object. You now have Puppet Warp is a smart filter. Double click on Puppet Warp, the filter. Do not go back in to menu edit down to Puppet Warp, or you will do Puppet Warping on top of Puppet Warping, which is not, I mean, you can do that, but you don't want to do that right now. I want to simply edit what I've already done. So double click on the Puppet Warp Smart Filter. It will bring you back in. You can see all of the pins again. So then I'm going to come down and I'm actually going to click on the pin that is at her wrist. Now, you need to remember the order that we put these in. When we did all of these pins around, the one at her wrist was the last one that we actually put in. It is the lowest in the stack. You can change the stacking order of your pins. So to do that, if you look up at your options bar up at the very top, you'll see there's a thing that says pin depth. What we want to do is we want to bring this pin from the lowest point in the image up more to the top. So you click on the first of the icons with the little arrow that's pointing up, not the arrow that's pointing down. That would actually be pushing your pin depth deeper, but the arrow that's pointing up, and lo and behold, her hand is now on the front of her skirt. Now, if you look at this, you'll see that there's also a small line that goes around it that's transparent. And you say to yourself, well, that doesn't work very so. Look, I've got this cutout here. That cutout is actually the mesh. If you turn the show mesh on, you can see that the mesh is actually extends beyond her hand slightly. It extends beyond her whole body slightly to make sure that you've encompassed her entirely in that cocoon. So you see that weird thing, that weird cutout, but once you actually commit the Puppet Warp, it goes away. So I'm going to unshow the mesh, and I'm simply going to say okay to that again. And now you've moved her hand onto her thigh. This is an incredibly powerful tool. Questions about this? Yes. We're going to move it right back again. So do you have her hand behind her or in front of her? Okay, so everybody double click on Puppet Warp again to go back into it. Again, I'm clicking this same pin again. So Charles, in your case, you're going to do the pin depth, the options that are at the very top, pin depth. You want to do the pin depth, the icon that is on that's the left icon. That's bringing the pin depth up. For the rest of you who want to put this back behind her, you click on the pin depth that's pointing down, and it goes behind her. So you can go back and forth with this shit all day long. Is that making sense to everyone? Okay, so how can we really use this tool other than this? Most of you, I'm just going to tell you right now, for all the fashion shooters in here, there is not a fashion image that you have seen in the last, 20 years, or at least not something that was done by a professional photographer where people have not been stretched taller. It's just a fact of life. Now, stretching taller is a very difficult thing to do. If you just use Transform in Photoshop to actually do it, what happens is that you can lengthen everything, but when you do it, faces get lengthened as well. So you get somebody who's taller, but then they have a horse face. The only joke I know, horse walks into a bar, bartender says, "Why the long face?" Actually, I know more than one joke. Celine Dion walks into a bar, bartender says, "Why the long face?" Celine Dion and a horse walk in a bar together, bartender says, "Why the long faces?" It's a problem. So in the old school, what we would do is you would cut the head off, stretch the body out, and then put the head back on so that the head didn't distort. But in Puppet Warp, you can actually do anything like that. So that's what we're going to do. We're actually going to elong her neck a little bit, and then we're also going to make her legs a little bit longer. So to elong her neck, if we come up, zoom into her head, if we simply click on the pin that's right in the middle of her forehead, everybody else, you can see I've got the rest of her body is pinned, and I click and drag up, it distorts everything. It's not, her lower body hasn't distorted, but her whole face is certainly distorted. That's not going to work for me. Command Z to undo that. Instead, we need to put a series of pins that basically cover her entire face. So I'm going to start at her chin. I'm going to put a pin down. I'm going to put another pin on her cheek, another pin here, a pin in her ear, a pin in her hair. You need to get all of the hair. You need to set pins on all of this. So if you get too close, so I'm going to get really close to one of these pins and try to put another one down, you will get this warning that comes up and it says, this is too close. This is also an issue of your of the density of your mesh. Again, with more points, you can get points much closer to each other. On a coarser one, you will get this warning much, much, much more often. So I'm going to say, okay, fine, sorry, didn't mean to do that. And I'm going to continue to work my way around. You need to pin that little part of her hair that's shooting out to the side, otherwise that will move. Her ear again, and the rest of her cheek. I'm going to put one pin on each eye, and then also in the middle of her nose. Then I'm also going to put a couple of pins at more on the top of her shoulder. So I'm going to do one on this side and one on this side, and probably one at the base of her neck, because I had something that was really much, much, much further down. So I've got a whole series of pins now. Now what I want to do is move all of the ones that are her face. So to do that, select just one of them, and you'll see it puts the little white dot in there. In order to select more of them, you have to hold down the Shift key, and then you click every single other one, and you want to make sure that you get a little white dot in the center of every one of those pins that you put down. Now, I know you're thinking to yourself right now, son of a bitch, I can't believe you made me put this many pins down, and you're going to make me go through this shit. Can't there be an easier way to actually select multiple pins? I don't know, like dragging your cursor across all of them to select all of them? Yeah, Adobe, it would make it a whole lot easier, but they haven't done that. At any rate, this is so much better than anything else you can do. This is worth the pain in the ass that just was. Then let go of your shift key. It does not matter which one of these you select right now. I'm going to just select the one. We'll just do her nose. Click and drag straight up. And you can see it elongates her neck. Don't overdo this or you turn people into freaks. Then take your shift key, hold down your shift key. You will temporarily get the hand. Let's go down to the legs. We are going to elongate her legs a little bit. I'm going to zoom back out slightly. To elongate her legs, what we need to do is we need to do it in two phases. We need to make her thighs longer and we need to make her shins longer. So to get her thighs longer, I'm going to then click the pins that are at the bottom hem of her skirt. So the very first time I click on one of those, all the pins that are up at her head that we had that were white, they've all gone away now. This is the only one that's white. Hold down the shift key and click on the shift key and click on the next one. And I'm going to put down another pin right at the front of her skirt too. So I'm going to put 4 across here. Make sure you hold down the shift key and select all 4. Sorry, I'll do that. Okay, I'm going to zoom back out just a little bit more so we can really see what's going on here. So now I've got the bottom of her skirt pinned. So now when I pull this down, the problem I'm going to have is it's going to make her thighs longer, but it's going to make her shins shorter. Look what happens. I'm going to just click and drag one down, and as I pull this pin down, again, it makes her thighs longer, but her feet are shorter because her feet are pinned. So hit Command Z to undo that, hold down the shift key, and click on the pins that are holding down her shoes and her boots and all of that, and then go back up and click on this whole part, and it will make her thighs slightly longer. And now finally we need to make her shins a little bit longer. So to do that, we need to click on a different pin to unselect all the ones that are selected. So I'm just going to do the one up by her wrist. I don't want to add another pin. I just want to click on that. It gets rid of the white pins on the other ones. And then I'm simply going to click on all the pins that are her shoes. Everybody else is frozen. Click on one of those and pull slightly down. And then hit the OK button or the check mark. Double click on the hand. You have now put her hand behind her butt. You've actually made her neck a little bit longer and her whole body a little bit longer. If you want to see how this relates to the original one, click on the figure that's underneath and then go back up to your puppet warp one, and you can actually hit the V key to get the move tool and drag her a little bit to the side. And that's what we've actually done. Crazy. Final thing, I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I'm going to turn off the figure that's underneath it. One last thing to do, double click on your puppet warp to zoom back in. Come back into that hand that's actually on the back of her. So the hand that I've actually got on the back side of her. I don't really want this hand on the back side of her. I want it really more, like right now, it does look like she's scratching her ass. I really want it more just laying flat against her hip. So select it. So, son of a bitch. Make it active. Hold down the Option key, and remember I said you get that circle, but then you get the scissors. If we click right now, it will get rid of that pin, but if you still hold down your Option key and you move off of it, you will get this circle that goes around that pin. You can now click, and you'll see that my cursor now has got arrows that are pointing counterclockwise and clockwise. You can now click and move to the left, and it will rotate around that pin, or to the right, and it will rotate around that pin. I'm actually simply going to push it out so that it looks like she's barely touching the side of her skirt, like that, and then go ahead and commit it. That's puppet warp. I know. Really quickly, your assignment. I'm going to give you guys a clue. I shouldn't do this, but but I love each and every one of you, so I'm going to do it anyway. So if you go in and you take a look at the assignment folder, I'm going to give you 2 clues here. So if you take a look at the assignment itself, this is what it looks like. There's a picture right here. It's actually one of my pictures. And so the assignment on this is to smooth out, there's a file in here, and it's file number 059, is to smooth out the swimsuit. That's the only thing that you really are supposed to be doing in here, right? Simple enough. So if you take a look at the folder, there's more than one file in here. 059 is this one right here. I'm going to just open it up into Photoshop really quickly so you can see it. That's what the suit looks like. You need to get rid of all the wrinkles. The most successful versions of this, well, first off, let me do this really quickly, and then we're almost done. I'm going to select all of them and open all of them. And it opens them all up into photos. How the hell did that happen? Oh, here they all are. So, just a clue. There's a reason that there's more than one file in here. That's your first clue. The second clue is that the most successful versions of this I've ever seen done involve puppet war. Now that's pretty generous, don't you think? And I'll see you guys next week. Oh, by the way, did everybody hear? Christina actually found out what the problem was. Photoshop 2025 does not support importing swatches, or at least not on Windows. Yeah, yet another thing Adobe fucked up.